Right, quick announcement first. I'll be streaming on Twitch TV/DukeSloth right now, and I will also be giving away a Halloween chest and maybe some other stuff as well. And then we will stream the patch notes and all that kind of stuff. Just if you're watching early. Topic for today. Heartseeker in a more or less direct comparison to Ikavel. First of all, I want to clear up a misconception about Heartseeker. Many people think that it is especially effective on guards with a toggle ability, which is correct, but the reasoning is wrong. They think it's effective because you can toggle the Heartseeker proc and then use your abilities after and make your ability stronger. That's not correct. As a matter of fact, if you use an ability, the amplifier, as you see in this clip above, works for that very same ability. So the moment you use an ability, it already gets the amplifier of Heartseeker, overall making it a fair bit more effective than some people think. It's still nice to use the toggle just to get the steroid if you don't want to use an ability, for example on Rama Xbalanque, but if you use an ability after, then you don't need to use the toggle to get the extra damage because it actually makes no difference. Now, when it comes to figuring out the strength of Heartseeker compared to other items, most people tend to compare it to Transcendence. I think that that's not quite where it fits. Heartseeker maybe has the benefit of being a decent starter item, more or less. It has some nice power and movement speed, but it doesn't really compete with Death Toll in terms of sustain or mana or anything. So I don't think it should really replace that. And as such, it doesn't have much reasoning to replace Transcendence either, as Transcendence is just built because you have to get it online early because of the stacks and because otherwise it loses a lot of its effectiveness. So what you should really compare it to is an item in a similar price range. And as such, I figured there's an item which costs 100 gold less, which really isn't the world, and is otherwise kinda there for a similar, not the same, but a similar purpose. And that's Ikavel. You could also consider comparing with boots and stuff, but I'm gonna leave that out here because boots are just something that's gonna be essential for your build. And both Heartseeker and Ikavel are rather cheap burst items or boost items that give you a temporary power spike and will eventually be sold when the build is complete, in most scenarios anyways. So if you look at these items, they have very different stats but end up being quite similar in the end. On Ikavel, we have 30% attack speed, 10 flat penetration, and up to 30 power, depending on how much you have stolen from the enemy. The stolen part is important here, we'll get to that later. With Heartseeker, you have 25 power, you have 10% movement speed, and you have up to 40 extra power and up to 15% extra attack speed, depending on how many stacks you have. Now, the reason these items can be compared, because under certain circumstances, both of them have power, both of them have attack speed, and one has more power, the other one has more penetration, which kind of evens itself out to some extent. I've done some comparison in terms of how much damage they can output, both trying to get damage off on Ikavel with full stacks and Heartseeker with full stacks. And in both scenarios, the damage numbers, as long as you're fighting a squishy, are actually very, very similar. The damage differences are less than 10 per ability, and it really shouldn't matter in the bigger picture. I did this with Oler, maybe with other gods it would be a little different, but as one item has a lot more power and the other one has more flat penetration, they kinda even themselves out, because flat penetration helps you with extra ability damage from the base damage, whereas power just helps you with the scaling of the ability. The interesting thing here is that even the DPS is quite similar between the two items. You would think that because of the higher attack speed on Ikavel, it would outclass Heartseeker, but actually they are very, very close to each other, depending on how many stacks you have on each, obviously. In the long run, if you assume that Ikavel is constantly at full stacks, the DPS of Heartseeker falls off a bit because it obviously has to restack in between, but it's nothing major. The difference is really not that huge due to the fact that Heartseeker simply has more power. When it comes to tankier targets, Heartseeker is actually better. The tankier target is, the less effective is flat penetration, the more important is percentage penetration, but power scaling still stays kinda nice, and as such, Heartseeker gets the edge here. For example, against a tanky support around the same level 12 is where they did the calculations, you would have roughly 50 damage more if you used 2 abilities that deal damage. It's nothing that is huge, but it's still a difference. And it's worth keeping in mind, the DPS also swings in favor of Heartseeker. Like I said, Flat Penetration just does less. So judging from that, given the fact that Heartseeker actually has extra movement speed on top, it would be easy to think that Heartseeker would be the better choice. The downside here is Heartseeker in a direct comparison, in a direct trade with Ikaival. In direct trade, Ikaival will steal your power, and will steal 30 of your power, meaning that the complete base power of Heartseeker is gone and even 5 more than that. Because of that, all of a sudden, Heartseeker loses a lot of effectiveness in a direct trade. What Heartseeker, on the other hand, excels at is ability burst. If you are fighting with an enemy and you have your abilities up and you want to poke them out, but you don't even want to waste much time basic attacking them down, just gonna nuke them, then Heartseeker should be the better choice. You get your full stacks on the minion wave, which are then staying up as long as you want, different from Ikaival. So you can just wait 2 seconds until your enemy loses his stacks, and then engage on them with your abilities. In that scenario, you can do a lot of damage in a very short time and simply get out. So I think Heartseeker has more of a validity in terms of building on hunters that can support this kind of playstyle. I would say, for example, Medusa can do that very well, or Ullr can do that very well, as obviously as well as some hunters that just generally benefit from the item. It also helps with certain things. For example, for Xbalanque, who's got a relatively weak early game, you can amp it up for the clear, but you can also then load a lot more damage than you would usually be able to onto an enemy by simply using all your abilities in a very short time, having that steroid and then backing out. Just to be clear here, I do not think that Heartseeker is crazy good. In fact, I think Ikaival is a bit of a problem in itself because the item offers a lot for the price. If Ikaival was to not steal power from the enemy but just give you extra power, it would probably still be viable simply because of the stats that it gives for the relatively low price. But that's another matter altogether. If we're looking at Heartseeker here, I would say that this item has a little bit more of a justification to be used than some people think it does, outside of gods like Arachne, obviously. But you really have to question if the movement speed will help you. Now, on certain hunters, I really like a little bit of movement speed. For example, Medusa. Medusa is very nice because it works in synergy with her passive. You are just a lot faster, and that also helps in trades. Don't underestimate movement speed in trades. But as you always have that movement speed penalty anyways, you will mostly not have crazy benefit from it. You will sometimes, but it's just not something that highly increases the value of the item for hunters. Now, for other classes, this is obviously different, but I'm looking specifically at hunters here, because on other classes, you will usually not build Ikaival either. Another extremely important point is that you have to keep in mind that Heartseeker needs the 5 stacks to be effective. So you kind of need to have a wave around, or in a direct trade where you start with 0 stacks, you're going to have a big problem because you're at an inherent disadvantage for quite most of the trade, and by the time you hit your stacks, you may already be dead. All in all, if you want to have trading advantage, Ikaival is probably still your best choice. If you're playing an ability-focused hunter and you want some unexpected burst, you're looking to a long-range poke, for example, as you would with Ullr, then I would say give Heartseeker a go. I would do it in a build that's rather simplistic, that's kind of the same as Ikaival, from a Death Toll to Warrior or Ninja Tabi, really matter of your choice, to Heartseeker, often Warrior Tabi in this case because you're gonna go for an ability-based character. But as such, it can work. It's more of a fun item, but I would say maybe it will see some more viability when people understand how it functions properly. That's it for this video. I also tried out something new. I've got some footage from Valken in the background. His Twitter's linked down below. Shouts to him. This is something I'm just trying out, and I'd like to hear your guys' opinions on this. I usually don't play ADC too much, as you know. I'm not a very good ADC player, and I figured, you know, I might just not play ADC for once, and Valken offered on Twitter if I wanted to use his footage. He's a high-level player. He's playing in the, or has played in the Challenger Cup, so he knows what he's doing much better than I would. You may have seen him in some pro players games as well. And I figured it would be interesting to just see someone else play that, you know, you may learn a little bit more from in the role. Let me know what you think about this, if you want to see more of it, or if you would rather see my gameplay, as shitty as it may be on ADCs. Up to you. I just want to give it a try and see how you feel. Once again, I will also be streaming on Twitch right now, so if you want to stop by, twitch.tv/DukesLoth. Other than that, thank you guys for watching. I will see you later today for the patch notes review. DukesLoth, out. And this is the part where I still don't have my outro done, so I'm just going to talk for 20 seconds. This is going to be my outro stream. You got like the link to my Twitter, you got the link to my subscribe button if you haven't done that yet, shame on you. Then there is my newest video and maybe a playlist, we'll see. So, feel free to check that out as well.